Did the concept of power levels help or hurt the Dragon Ball franchise? In this video, we're going to discuss that. But before the video begins, make sure to subscribe and enable all notifications, so you can stay up to date with all of my videos right away when they come out. Now without further ado, let's get into the video. So joining me in this video today is someone you've seen on my channel in the past, and someone I'm sure that you've seen his videos time and time again throughout the ages. His name is Geekdom 101. How's it going?
I'm good, man. I certainly hope that they have and will continue to. First of all, please, I'm begging you, don't just comment power levels are bullshit. Please, it's a dead Team 4-star meme. It's not funny. It's like saying Gohan's dad is Piccolo or Yamcha sucks or over 9,000. Please be more creative. That's all I have to say. Because you know you're going to get this comment. You know you're going to get it. You know you are.
Yep, on every video like this.
Every time we do a GT video, there's always that one guy from the back of the bus with a booger in his nose who has to say GT's not canon. Every time. Let's not go there this time.
That's not canon! And then they spell it with 3 N's.
I'm sorry. Don't edit this out, please.
So as we know in the Dragon Ball community, power levels and power scaling have been a very big part of this franchise for decades now. Ever since they were originally introduced in the first arc of the Dragon Ball Z section of the franchise, when Raditz was first introduced and brought along with him more science fiction-y elements, including the idea that a character's power can be summed up using numbers read on a scouter. And then it all kind of just went from there. But of course, before that point, we did have no real power levels, and things were kind of more open to how powerful characters could become, where Tien and even someone like Yamcha or Krillin was involved. And, it wasn't like they were always impossibly behind Goku. There was always a way that they could somehow catch up or stay relevant.
Right.
But when power levels were really introduced with Raditz, and then they continued to expand in the Saiyan and especially the Frieza arcs of the manga and anime, things kind of took a very different turn, because many characters kind of ended up falling to the wayside because the fact that their number compared to Goku or Gohan, and really everyone involved with the Namek Crisis, was at a very significantly lower level. And as a result, I feel like when it came to these power levels, even though it was really interesting conceptually, it also kind of led to a number of issues regarding other characters and, numerical comparisons.
Well, I feel like the main thing about power levels is I think a lot of people don't understand the fundamental purpose of power levels and why it was even introduced. One thing people need to understand is that power levels is not necessarily just there to tell you how strong a character is. That's surface level stuff. You have to go a little bit deeper beneath the surface. You have to understand that the culture of Frieza's empire and the Saiyan culture has been a class-based system. And when you have that in mind, power levels and, battle power from birth is all they really care about. They determine your class based on your power level, not based on your education, not based on your background, or even your lineage necessarily, even though the Vegeta family has their own lineage, but they've all been pretty strong. It's all based on your battle power from birth. And so because of that, you have this system where people who are not strong get discarded. And that's kind of what became the story of Goku. What Toriyama was trying to illustrate to us with power levels, that Goku was not meant to be as strong as he was, but through hard work, dedication, and good trainers was able to achieve it, whereas Vegeta, he was overconfident. And throughout a lot of the series, it's a recurring thing with Vegeta, and it's all because he had been brainwashed as a kid to think that him being a prince meant he was better than other people. This is a very deep discussion here when we're talking about this. And so because of that, power levels were used as a way to not just illustrate, oh my god, his power level's over 8,000, and give us those oh my god moments. That's not the only reason. It was also done to kind of illustrate the differences in upbringing between Goku and Vegeta. So I feel like, yes, I think power levels were extremely important during those days, the early Dragon Ball Z days, in sort of differentiating the difference between Goku, Vegeta, and not just that, on a larger scale, Goku and the entirety of Frieza's army and the rest of the Earthlings. Because we constantly see situations where, you know, even on Namek, scouters were breaking and people were like, oh my goodness, how can this person be so strong? Because the Frieza army, despite being so large and expansive, didn't have this fundamental understanding. They were ignorant of the fact that there were very strong people on Earth. They had no idea. Earth was seen as a soft planet, so to speak. And throughout the years, because of Piccolo Daimao and other enemies they fought, they got stronger and stronger and stronger. So I think power levels actually served a much deeper purpose in Dragon Ball than people really give it credit for. And I feel like the reasons why they were dropped is because by the time that Goku was able to defeat Frieza and sort of become, you know, the legendary Super Saiyan, Densetsu no Super Saiyajin, which I love the way they say it in Japanese. When he was able to do that, it sort of showed that all that hard work that Goku had been doing in the gravity room on Kaio's planet and, you know, throughout the years with Kami all essentially did pay off. And after that arc, if you notice, power levels are pretty much dropped because you're already having scouters breaking in the Frieza saga. Can you imagine if someone tried to scan Cell or Majin Buu? It'd be impossible. It's unquantifiable with numbers. So it was like Toriyama sort of realized, okay, I can't keep doing this. Plus, the technological power of Frieza's empire, or their whole technology, was in a way sort of superseded by the androids. You know, as crazy as it may sound, it kind of was. So that's kind of the real deep aspect of power levels and why they even exist. And nobody really talks about this often enough. And I think it's people just kind of looking at Dragon Ball from the surface level and not going deeper into it. So yes, they certainly served a purpose. They created dramatic moments for a time, but you couldn't just keep doing that because it would have got ridiculous. I mean, dude, back in the day, in like the 90s, there were all these Dragon Ball Z websites that had these power level charts that were ridiculous and stupid. Like you had like Buu Saga power levels that were made up, but they would sit there and say they were official, which they're not. There's no official Buu Saga power levels. The last power level that was official, like stated in the original Dragon Ball manga, was Trunks being at 5 suppressed when he first showed up from the future. That's it. Everything else is either movie or something else.
And I think that Toriyama also did a number of things during the Cell arc that actually made it to where it was pretty clear that he was trying to get away from power levels. For instance, we have a scene with Vegeta where he says, "We Saiyans can't be reduced to numbers." You know, once again trying to show that they've gone beyond numbers themselves, that they're now unquantifiable. Then you have the scene with Piccolo where he's fighting Android 20, and what he tells him is, "Remember this, in battle we can amplify what you call energy in one tremendous burst. What you stole from me just now was nothing." So even whatever power level you'd be able to read from these characters when they're powered up and standing in front of you wouldn't actually be the level of power they're hitting you with or that they're jumping out of the way of your blast with at the actual moment. They've almost kind of taken the concept of Kaioken and then they've expanded it to their general fighting to where even someone like Piccolo, who doesn't have that ability, can do it. So there's definitely things that Toriyama tries to do to get away from that concept. And I really like how you put it when you referred to power levels as a narrative storytelling concept or tool. And I think that Goku is the perfect example of this, because Goku's character is all about overcoming the limits imposed upon him, whether it be power or class. So it all makes sense from a storytelling perspective that the low-class warrior would rise up to become the legendary Super Saiyan. But after that point, they didn't really serve a real narrative purpose other than the purpose of power scaling. But unfortunately, even when Toriyama tried his best to get away from it, a lot of the power level debates and, you know, that kind of mindset and structure that fans had become accustomed to at that point kind of also became a permanent fixture in the story, to where even nowadays, people are still asking questions such as, what power level was Ultra Instinct Goku?
It's impossible to quantify, though, because it's been so many years since we last saw a power level. It's impossible. To me, that's a waste of time because power levels were shifted into becoming power scaling, because the only way to figure out how strong someone is through scaling after the power levels thing had been discarded by Toriyama in the Android saga. So you're left with people trying to guess and figure it out and listen to statements made in the series, whether it be by Goku, Cell, Piccolo, Roshi, Kami, the Kais, whoever is that narrative exposition character, that's who tells us how strong people people are, or the narrator or whatever the case is. That's it. I feel like discussing power levels after the Frieza saga is pointless because there are no power levels. You can just make up a number in your head. It's literally, you can't quantify it. They trained for 3 years after the arrival of Trunks, before the arrival of 19 and 20, and we have no idea how much training they did, what their power level was during that time, so there's just no point. It's a waste of time. Instead, you can just scale based on feats and based on statements. That's it. So I think power levels served a purpose, but I think what happened was Toriyama just kind of decided to drop it because, again, the scouters would have kept breaking. Number one. Number two, Frieza was out of the picture, and so was his empire. And number three, to be honest, it's just easier for him to just write it and just have statements, and that way he can write whatever the hell he wants and have it not contradict something else. It's much more of a narrative tool than people understand. I really feel that because it only makes sense for the first 2 arcs. After Frieza saga, there's no more scouters. I mean, except for Resurrection F during the Renaissance, but in the original story, the scouters are all gone. Like, the Empire's defeated up until, again, Resurrection F. We're talking about the original manga, so there was no point in Toriyama bringing them back. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and you could tell by that point in Resurrection F that Toriyama had so separated his writing from power levels that the second we hear a new one with Frieza saying, I'll get to 1.3 million, it no longer makes the slightest amount of sense.
Even he forgot what he wrote in the original manga, even though he claims to have gone back and read it. I don't know if I believe that one. Maybe he read it in a different language.
Yeah, maybe he meant to write 1.3 trillion and he just completely misspelled it,
You know what? That actually would be funny if that was the case. And that is a Toriyama-esque mistake.
It's not unlike Toriyama to forget something. After all, he forgot that he didn't forget about launch. So there you go.
Right.
So looking back at Dragon Ball Z, and especially the first 2 arcs of the story, do you think it realistically could have happened the same way, or could have really worked without power levels?
I think it would have been a very different story. When you take away power levels and the class-based system of Frieza's empire and the Saiyans, you've taken away the entire Goku-Vegeta relationship and dichotomy. You're taking away the juxtaposition of Goku and Frieza. So I feel like if you do that, you're telling a totally different story. Like, they really are that important for that section of the story. Again, we're not even talking about Cell and Buu or even like, Red Ribbon or Piccolo. Just from the Saiyan saga to the Frieza saga, they are crucial for telling that story, the Prince and the Pauper narrative of Goku's upbringing versus Vegeta's and Frieza. Because Frieza could never believe the legend because these guys were all born with lower power levels than him. See what I'm saying? So he could never believe the legend. He thought it was all BS. Remember, he originally thought that if they ganged up on him, they would beat him.
Yeah, that's the reason why he destroyed the planet.
Right. So I feel like people misunderstand this. Like, I think you definitely need some form of power level or some form of power-based storytelling for that section of the series. It would be fan fiction if you just got rid of it. You know what I mean?
So ultimately, I think we've shown how power levels help the Dragon Ball story in the short term, by serving as a strong narrative tool that helped to move the story forward. However, they've also had some lingering negative effects, which can still be felt in the community to this day. With that being said, the franchise is still continuing to prosper decades after they were phased out. So whatever negative impact they had clearly hasn't been able to hold it back by much. So what do you guys think? Let us know down below in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe and enable all notifications so you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.